It was a warm December morning in 1941. The sun rose over the Pacific, casting a golden shimmer across the waves. In the Hawaiian Islands, life felt peaceful. Farmers tended to their fields. Fishermen pulled in their morning catch. Children laughed as they ran along the beaches. Few could have imagined that, within hours, these same islands would be forever linked to one of the most infamous days in American history. When people think of December 7, 1941, they think of the name Pearl Harbor, the surprise attack that catapulted the United States into World War II. The sudden roar of aircraft engines, the thunderous explosions, the smoke that rose into the clear Hawaiian sky. Those events are remembered, retold, and taught in classrooms across America. But there is another story, one that happened on that very same day, not in the bustling harbor of Oahu, but on a quiet, isolated island nearby. A place where the war came not in the form of bombs or torpedoes, but in a way no one could have predicted. This story begins far from the chaos of battleships and fighter planes. It begins on an island so small and remote that most people in Hawaii rarely visit it, even today. It had no electricity, no paved roads, and no telephones. Just a small community living in a world of its own. Its isolation had always been its shield, keeping it apart from the troubles of the outside world. But on that December morning, that shield was about to be pierced. As the morning unfolded, news of the attack on Pearl Harbor had not yet reached every corner of Hawaii. Radio silence and confusion kept the outer islands in the dark. Life on this small island carried on as usual. But then, something strange appeared in the sky. It was the sound they noticed first, a droning engine, far louder than anything they were used to hearing. Planes occasionally flew over the islands, but this one seemed out of place. As it drew closer, it became clear that it was not a passenger plane, nor was it one of the small craft the locals were familiar with. It was a military aircraft, and it was in trouble. Smoke trailed from its fuselage. The engine sputtered and coughed. The pilot was clearly struggling to keep it in the air. The islanders watched as the plane circled, losing altitude. Finally, with a desperate maneuver, it came down hard in a field, skidding to a stop. Dust rose in the air. The plane's propeller bent. And then the pilot climbed out. He was a young man wearing a flight suit unlike any the islanders had seen. He spoke in a language they didn't understand. He smiled politely, appearing calm, even though his aircraft had just crash-landed. The islanders approached cautiously, unsure of what to make of him. They didn't know it yet, but this man was not just a pilot in distress. He was part of the very force that had just attacked Pearl Harbor. The man's name was Shigenori Nishikaichi, a fighter pilot in the Imperial Japanese Navy. Earlier that morning, he had taken off from an aircraft carrier as part of the attack wave targeting Oahu. His mission had been to strafe airfields and cause as much destruction as possible. But during the attack, his plane had been hit by anti-aircraft fire. Damaged and low on fuel, he had been unable to return to his carrier. Following pre-mission instructions for such emergencies, he headed toward the closest land, one marked on his briefing map as a place where he might find help. The island was called Niʻihau. In 1941, Niʻihau was privately owned by the Robinson family, descendants of a Scottish settler who had purchased it in the 19th century. It was home to fewer than 200 residents, mostly native Hawaiians, who spoke Hawaiian as their primary language. There was no official connection to the outside world other than occasional boat trips. Because of its isolation, it was thought to be a quiet and safe place. The Japanese military had even speculated that it might serve as a potential emergency landing site for their pilots. When Nishikaichi landed, the locals initially had no idea about the attack on Pearl Harbor. They treated him as an unexpected guest, offering hospitality. He was taken in by a local family, fed, and given a place to rest. Some of the islanders even treated his crash as a curiosity, not realizing the danger he represented. But as the hours passed, word slowly began to reach Niʻihau about the events on Oahu. Through battery-powered radios, the news crackled in. Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States was at war. The realization dawned on the islanders. This pilot was not just a foreign visitor, he was an enemy combatant. At first, the islanders decided to hold Nishikaichi until they could hand him over to the authorities on the main islands. They placed him under informal guard, but things were about to take a dangerous turn. Nishikaichi was desperate. He knew that if captured, he would face interrogation, and possibly worse. He also realized he had a potential advantage. Not everyone on Niʻihau saw him as the enemy. Among the residents were a few of Japanese ancestry, including a man named Yoshio Harada and his wife. Harada, born in Hawaii, had struggled to find his place in the small, close-knit community. He spoke Japanese and could communicate with Nishikaichi, something most others on the island could not. Over the next day, Nishikaichi began to work on Harada, appealing to his sense of identity and perhaps resentment toward his neighbors. He convinced Harada that it was his duty to help him. The situation grew tense as Harada began assisting Nishikaichi in planning an escape and in recovering important papers from the downed aircraft, including attack maps and codes. What had begun as an unusual incident was now turning into a crisis. The islanders were unarmed, cut off from outside help, and facing a trained enemy pilot with a growing list of allies. When the time came, Nishikaichi and Harada made their move. They overpowered the man guarding the pilot, seized a shotgun, and took several islanders hostage. Panic spread through the community. Families hid in their homes. Others fled into the rugged countryside. But Niʻihau's isolation had a way of forcing people to take matters into their own hands. Among the residents were Ben Kanahele, a respected local, and his wife, Ella. When the opportunity arose, Ben confronted Nishikaichi. The pilot opened fire, wounding Ben 3 times, once in the chest, once in the hip, and once in the groin. Despite his injuries, Ben tackled Nishikaichi, lifted him off the ground, and slammed him into a stone wall. Ella then struck the pilot with a rock, and together they ended the threat. Harada, realizing the situation was hopeless, took his own life. The remaining islanders secured the scene and awaited help from the main islands. When U.S. military officials finally arrived, they were shocked by the events. In the days following, the Niʻihau Incident became a small but significant part of wartime intelligence reports. The U.S. government noted that individuals of Japanese ancestry had assisted the enemy pilot, a fact that sadly contributed to the justification for the mass internment of Japanese Americans on the mainland in the months that followed. In the larger story of Pearl Harbor, the Niʻihau Incident was soon overshadowed. The devastation at Oahu was so great that few outside Hawaii even heard about the events on this small island. But for the people of Niʻihau, December 7, 1941, was not just the day the world learned the name Pearl Harbor. It was the day the war came to their shores in the form of a single, desperate pilot. Today, Niʻihau remains largely closed to outsiders, preserving its quiet way of life. The Niʻihau Incident is remembered mostly by historians and the descendants of those who lived through it. It stands as a reminder that history is made up not only of the big, headline-grabbing events, but also of the small, human stories that might otherwise fade into obscurity. The next time you hear about Pearl Harbor, remember, somewhere beyond the headlines, on a small, wind-swept island, another drama was unfolding. It was a different kind of battle, fought not with fleets and armies, but with trust, betrayal, and the courage of a few determined people. And while the name Niʻihau may never be as famous as Pearl Harbor, its story is forever tied to that day. If you found this story interesting and want to discover more forgotten chapters of history, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss our future uploads. And if you have a moment, share this video, because sometimes the stories that get left out of the history books are the ones we need to hear the most.